Good day to English, good day Sir Rivera. And for today, we're still on the process of grasping the what's and the how's of LPP or language planning and policy. And in today's chapter, or for this chapter, we're going to be focusing on current planning and policy issues. So let's begin with our learning objectives. First is for us to be guided towards in-depth reading on the topics and given the opportunity to develop their skills of analysis and synthesis of theoretical and methodological issues. Second is to be equipped with the core analytical skills necessary to engage in research on language planning and policy, including data collection, analysis, and presentation. Next, describe and analyze language attitudes and ideologies and the ways in which they influence the implementation of language political decisions in society. Then, present the central theories and methods in language policy and planning research. And then lastly, use these terms and concepts to describe and analyze language situations in various contexts. And now we ask ourselves, why do we need to study or why do we need to know about the subdimensions of LPP? Of course, for us to have a deeper understanding or a solid basis to detail out the genres of language planning, and for us to have also an awareness of our own language and other language, on how they came to be and how they are chosen by the government or the agencies that supported LPP, how they came up with choosing this dialect as the national or official language. You could answer that after this chapter, but now let us now proceed to our topic. So the subdimensions of LPP that we're going to tackle is anchored to this book that you could find on the module Thomas Ruiz Santos, An Introduction to Language Policy, Theory and Method. So this provides an evaluation of the theoretical dimension of LPP studies. On the one hand, the writer claims that political, financial, and social theory offer valuable multidisciplinary equipment to LPP studies. On the other hand, he asserts that, or he declares that the theoretical perspective adopted with the aid of researchers affects their analysis and at the equal time has changed on the language policies and practices. Let's all remember that there are three subdimensions of language planning: status, corpus, and acquisition planning. But now let's dig deeper on the status planning. I summarize status planning to three definitions. According to the book, it refers to the allocation of new functions to a language. It deliberates efforts to allocate the features of languages and literacies within a speech community. It includes popularity choices, making a unique language or range an official language or dialect. Let's just remember that status planning is all about the want or the desire to change the way a language is used. It's about making some languages or dialect as an official language for a territory. Like for an example is the Singapore government. And the Singapore government recognizes the importance of the English language for a multiracial society. So therefore, it has been attributed the status of an official language and the national language. Their government has been active in promoting status planning. So one of the most distinct changes in the linguistic landscape of Singapore after independence was promoting the status of the English language. So how is it done? So this is done by allocating resources to develop English in various functional domains such as the government, law, business, administration, and in particular, the medium of instruction in schools in Singapore. So that's the basic example of status planning.
Good day to English, especially to Mr. Rivera. Now, I will be discussing the last two subdimensions of the language planning and policy, which are the corpus planning and acquisition planning. It is just a continuation of the report of Miss Laine, Alison, Lobarbio. Corpus planning is concerned with the internal structure of a language. It entails making modifications to the linguistic code and the creation of grammars and the dictionaries for the chosen language. When we say internal structure of language, it includes phonetics, which refers to the speech sounds, phonology for phonemes, morphology for words, and syntax, which refers to the phrases and sentences. Meaning, corpus planning is all about the language itself. And to simply put it, corpus planning standardizes grammar, spelling, pronunciation, and vocabulary. Typical things to do of corpus planning includes devising a writing gadget for a spoken language, initiating spelling reform, coining new words and phrases such as Yahoo and Twitter, and also nerd, and publishing grammar books. A central thing of corpus planning is language standardization, which can be understood as the introduction and establishment of a uniform linguistic norm for a particular language which has been adopted and bestowed with a national status. So it only means that corpus planning is the one who acts upon institutionalizing a common standard of language in terms of content and structure. Corpus planning additionally pertains to prescriptive intervention in the varieties of a language. This may additionally be carried out by creating new phrases or expressions, modifying old ones, or choosing among choice forms. So it says that corpus planning became the arbitrator, or what we so call the boundary in different languages, to have a standard language form by providing certain or specific rules. Corpus planning targets to strengthen the assets of a language so that it turns into a appropriate medium of communication for modern day matters and form of discourse, equipped with the terminology which for use in administration, education, and etc. Corpus planning is frequently related to the standardization of a language, involving the guidance of a normative orthography, grammar, and dictionary for the training of writers and audio system in speech community. Efforts at linguistic purism and exclusion of overseas phrases additionally belong to corpus planning, as do spelling reform and the introduction of new writing structure. For a formerly unwritten language, the first step in corpus planning is the improvement of writing system itself. So, in this statement, corpus planning has something to do not only in reforming the phrases, but also in diminishing what are unnecessary in the structure of language. Although language planners separate corpus and status planning conceptually, it is necessary to understand that the two dimensions interact with each other. So how they're interacting with each other? I just want you to remember this thing. It is simply because status planning focuses on the external use of language in the society, determining which language or dialect will be official. While corpus planning, it deals with the internal structure of the language. If there would be no common or standard rule of the content, grammar, or etc., there would be no common language in the society, because it is necessary to have a standard or the institutionalized content or structure of language for us not to have some confusion. The allocation of new language functions often requires changes in the linguistic system, such as the development of the new style and lexical items. Let us move on to the last subdimension of the language planning and policy, which is the acquisition planning. Acquisition planning includes the efforts to spread and promote the mastering of a language. But why is it important for us to promote and have the mastery of a language? Simple. It is because in order for us to have a better communication, an individual must have the mastery of a specific language as well as the internal structure of language that serves as the building blocks of the language. Acquisition planning works the teaching and learning of languages, whether countrywide languages or overseas languages. Acquisition planning is immediately associated to language spread. So, acquisition planning is all about teaching the language, whether intentional or unintentional. It also involves making the language more attractive to learn for speakers of other language. Example. Example is BTS. We all know that BTS is a well-known Korean pop group for their big hits. Their popularity opened up avenues to promote their language in a huge population. Now others are devoted to learn their language, starting from the simplest detail to more complex one. For you to have a deeper understanding about the acquisition planning, I would love to give another example, which is all about the activities done by the Maori community in New Zealand. So this example is about teaching and learning the language intentionally, because the previous example that I have given to you a while ago, which is all about the BTS, was in fact about teaching and learning the language unintentionally. So here it is. In the early 1980s, most Maori children had no knowledge of their ancestral language, and linguists identified Maori as an endangered language. In response to the decline of Maori, so-called language nests were established by the Maori community. In these preschools, older Maori-speaking members of the community worked voluntarily as caretakers and taught the Maori language to the children. So this is because they wanted to preserve their heritage language by letting the new generation of the Maori community learn that language.
Home domain.
Home domain. Their language beliefs are their attempts to influence the practices and beliefs of different individuals of the domestic speech community are critical. Immigrant dad and mom who hold heritage languages are obviously more probably to have teenagers who recognize them, while those who abandon them are encouraging shift. Home language is a language that is most commonly spoken by the members of the family for everyday interaction at home. It is also called the mother tongue. It is important to keep using home languages in both early years foundation stage setting at home. Children need to develop a strong foundation in the language that is dominant in the home, where most of the children spend most of their time. Home language skills are transferable to new language and then strengthen the children's understanding of the language used. Developing and maintaining the home language as the foundation for knowledge about language will support the development of the secondary language, which is English. Young children can learn two or more languages at the same time. They learn quickly when they have lots of experiences with adults who speak with and listen to them. Sometimes, children will combine words or phrases from both languages. It may sound as though they are confused, but they are actually learning the rules and vocabulary from both languages and sorting them out in their brains. It is a good sign that they are learning and thinking. Even the family, the presumably simplest and most fundamental area for its impact on verbal integrational language transmission, turns out to be open to have an impact on a different domain. Using your home language, it connects your children to your family. It also provides a connection to your important cultural traditions and to friends and neighbors who speak the same language. Using your home language allows you to teach your children and to learn new things together. Children should encourage to use their home language. Some research shows that continuing the use of the home language alongside their new language acquisition will make the process of learning English faster and easier. Parents' vital role is to improve their child language development. Parents are the first teachers in home. They should be keep using the language which is most natural to them and with their children. Religion domain. Religious institutions have their very own language policies, specially influenced with the aid of a set of faith about the importance of keeping the original language of the sacred text. Islam and pre-Vatican Roman Catholicism resist use of vernacular Judaism, allowed and persistent Christianity favored translation. All religions have their very own language policies that influence with the aid of a set of faith about the importance of keeping the original language of the sacred text. Many religions and spiritual movements believe that their sacred texts are divinely or supernaturally inspired. Holy language conveys a spiritual truth that establishes a connection with the divine and to foster communal identity and also to provide a promotion of mystical experiences and spiritual practices. The language plays a part in the practice of religion. Language used to perform most rituals and religious practices that plays a significant part in our life. Understanding a religion involves learning its associated language in most cases. Some of the sacred language as now is dead, and some of continue for limited purpose with an effort to promote the language and its adaptability to contemporary use. Language about God is essential to both personal and organized celebration to those traditions.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, 2E. I am Linneth Jusayan, and we are now going to further explore the domains. The model that Spolsky explored entails a number of defined speech communities, social levels, or domains, ranging from the family through various social structures and institutions up to and including the nation-state and supranational groupings, each of which has pressure for language choice engendered by internal and external language practices, language belief systems, ideologies, and language management efforts. And now let us talk about the legal domain. Under that is the prison domain. There has been growing pressure to permit increasing numbers of immigrants to recognize the manner of trials. And because of this growing pressure, there is now a need to add new participants to the domain, which are the legal interpreters. Moving on to the fitness domain. Professional participants such as doctors and nurses are in position to talk with their patients. And there are pragmatic reasons as to why these professionals are able to talk and communicate with their patients. They are under the provision of qualified interpreters, as opposed to the common use of patients' bilingual children. And this is dependent on the civil rights pressures in Europe and the US. And now let us proceed to the school domain. College proves to be one of the most complex and complicated of all the other domains. Why? It's because The participants in school domains bring with them the practices and other beliefs of a complex and increasingly more multilingual society, and the fact that there are various participants when we are talking about school domains. And with that being said, the two main categories of participants when it comes to school domains are the students, whose language practices and beliefs are to be modified, and of course the teachers, charged with the process of modification. The first participants are the students, and they vary of root on a range of vital dimensions. So what exactly are these dimensions, these critical and vital dimensions? This pertains to the student's age, gender, ability level, and their motivation. Students also differ in the variety or varieties of language that they know already and their level of proficiency to that certain language. The younger the students are, the most likely that their language pattern will reflect on the language pattern that they have at home. Their experiences in the home domain, in the neighborhood, and elsewhere will have introduced them to various language practices, have developed in them beliefs about language and values that they have assigned to language varieties, and exposed them to various attempts to modify their language practices and beliefs. So we are done discussing about the first participants when it comes to school domain or the college domain, which are the students. And now we will be moving on to the second team of contributors or participants, and they are the teachers. So just like the first participant, there is also variation in such criteria as age, gender, training experience, social status, and of course, language proficiency. An additional factor to be considered is the social, economic, and linguistic similarity or dissimilarity between teachers and students. Aside from teachers and students being the participants in school domain, there are also other significant, potentially significant participants. First among these are the professional administrators. So, who are these people? They are the principals and department heads in school, provosts, deans, and chairs in universities, who may be selected from the same group as the teachers, and who may be responsible to authorities outside the schools for management of its educational and language policies. In addition to that, non-academic support staff can also be considered significant participants in school domain, and they are the bus drivers, the secretaries, cleaners, and the cooks. That's the end of my report. Thank you for listening.